The post sat on the edge of the forbidden expanse, a stretch of dead space even the Galactic Council wouldn't map. Not because it was dangerous, but because Earth was on the other side of it, and everyone out here knew the silent rule. Don't cross into human territory, don't provoke, don't test the line. Nobody ever said it out loud, but they all felt it, the fear. Even the high-born species, the ones that bred with steel in their bones and centuries in their bloodlines, wouldn't touch Earth. We weren't feared for our fleets. We weren't feared for our tech. We were feared because we broke things. When pushed, we didn't negotiate. We didn't comply. We made examples. They taught that in military academies across 10 galaxies. Don't wake the humans. So naturally, some dumb bastard woke us. It started with a distress call, real faint, garbled, probably old, buried under radiation from some dead sun. But it came through on the old Terran bands. The ones no one had touched since the Treaty of Korev 12 banned all communication with Earth. I don't know why I listened. Maybe boredom, maybe instinct. Or maybe it was the way the signal ended, cut off like someone had been yanked mid-sentence. It repeated every 9 hours. I recorded it, cleaned it, played it on loop. That was a mistake. 3 days later, a council inspector showed up. Not an alien. I don't think they'd send one this close to human reach. This one was cloned, pale-skinned, probably vat-birthed, with no real memories. He had no name, just a badge. "You intercepted forbidden transmissions," he said flatly. I shrugged. "Didn't know listening was a crime?" "It is, when it comes from your kind." There it was. That word. Your kind. He scanned my station, took my logs, left a warning etched into my table like a scar. Do not seek what was locked away. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. I did what any soldier would do. I went back to my quarters. I played the damn message again. "To any Terran unit, this is Lieutenant Halder. Crash landed. Sector Gray 9. Hostile contact, repeat, hostile contact, this is Terran." It was real, and it was recent. Earth hadn't sent out Terran units in over 20 years. Not officially, anyway. So what the hell was Halder doing out there? I pulled up restricted maps, back-chained satellite pulses, hacked an old Union probe still orbiting the Gray 9 system. What I saw made my gut twist. Burn patterns on the soil. Crashed dropship. Biological remains. Non-human. Scorched. Torn. And one Terran heat signature. Still moving. Still alive. The second I reported it to Central Command, I got silence. Then a recall order. Effective immediately. Abandon post. Wipe data. Return to orbital dock. That's when I knew. They didn't want a rescue. They wanted it buried, and I wasn't okay with that. I'm not a hero. I'm not the guy who signs up to save the universe. I'm just another grunt with too many scars and too few reasons to give a damn. But something about Halder's voice stuck with me. Something in the way he said Terran, not as a name, but as a warning. So I disobeyed. Took a shuttle, killed the transponder, and crossed the line no one dared cross, into forbidden space, into human territory. Because if someone out there was messing with one of us again, if someone forgot why the galaxy made humans off limits, then it was time they remembered. The shuttle's cabin rattled like it was coming apart. My knuckles gripped the manual flight stick as the ship bucked and groaned against the edge of Gray 9's atmosphere. My hands were sweating, not from fear, but from memory. I'd crossed the line. Not a border marked on maps, not something monitored by satellites or signed by officials. No, this line was etched into the minds of every living species in the known systems. An invisible barrier that said, "Do not enter human space. Ever." Not because they couldn't, because they shouldn't. There were stories, quiet ones, whispers told in council bars, shared like old ghost tales, about a trade fleet that accidentally slipped into Terran orbit and was never heard from again, about a bounty crew that kidnapped a human child and disappeared without trace, about how the council doesn't warn people who mess with Earth. They just erase them completely. The records, the comm logs, the bloodlines, all gone. I didn't believe half of that crap, but I believed in instinct, and every molecule in my body was screaming the same thing now. Turn back, forget this. I didn't. The crash site came into view as I pierced the cloud cover, a burned scar across an otherwise lifeless wasteland. I circled once, keeping my sensors wide open. The probe I hacked earlier wasn't wrong. The remains were still there. Twisted metal, shredded hull plating, and what looked like something crawled away from the wreck. I landed a few clicks out. Couldn't risk drawing attention. If Halder was alive, he'd be hiding. Or worse, hunted. I suited up and grabbed my rifle. Not standard issue, personal model. Short barrel, gravity recoil dampener, magnet-charged rounds. Silent, lethal. The kind of weapon you only built when you knew you couldn't count on backup. Because out here, there was none. The ground crunched under my boots. Dry, flaky, almost brittle. Like the planet itself was too tired to fight anymore. But I knew better. This silence wasn't peace, it was watching. I found the first body half buried in dust. Not human, way too tall. 6 arms, insectoid frame, armor fused into its carapace like a living shell, mouth full of needle-like fangs. Dead. Throat slashed open. No weapon wounds, no blaster burns. Blade kill. Terran. Humans used knives when they wanted you to feel it. I kept moving. Within 20 minutes, I'd found 5 more, all different species, all equipped, all dead, and not in some battlefield shootout, ambushed, taken down fast, efficiently, like a predator tearing through livestock. Then I heard the scream. It wasn't human. Too shrill. But the pain in it? Real. And close. I dropped low, crept over a ridge, and saw the fire. A camp, makeshift, surrounded by wreckage. Alien equipment stacked high. Drones buzzing like flies. And in the center, pinned down and wounded. Halder. At least I assumed it was him. The armor was torn to hell, blackened with plasma scoring. Blood soaked one side. Human blood. But his eyes? They were alive, sharp, furious. Around him 3 aliens circled. Mercs by the look of them. Not soldiers. Scavengers. Opportunists. The kind who thought Earth was too quiet for too long and figured they'd test their luck. They weren't torturing him. They were trying to break him. One of them shouted something in a dialect I didn't recognize. Then it raised its shock staff. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle hissed. The alien dropped. The other 2 spun, caught off guard. The first took a round through the eye. The second bolted behind the wreckage, screeching in panic. I didn't bother chasing. I ran to Halder. He stared up at me through cracked lenses. "You're late," he rasped. I grinned. "You sent the invite too quiet." He tried to laugh. Coughs came out instead. I knelt and ran a stim into his thigh. His body jerked, tensing. The nanites went to work immediately. "Thought you were dead," I said. "I was close. Then they pissed me off." I glanced at the bodies. I noticed. He reached for my hand. His grip was weak, but the look in his eyes was stronger than any threat I'd seen since enlisting. They took something from me. From us. "What did they want?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the flickering fire. They were probing Terran space, quietly, looking for weaknesses, looking for proof that Earth's just a myth now, that we're not watching anymore. And what did they find? He turned to me, eyes dark. Me. We moved before nightfall. Whatever night meant here. The sky didn't change much, just got heavier. Thicker. Like something unseen pressed down harder once the sun dipped behind the black mountains. Halder could barely walk, but he refused to be carried. I helped him anyway. Dragged, guided, cursed when he bled too fast. The ridge we climbed gave us a full view of the valley below. And the ship. It wasn't Council. Too sleek. Too sharp. Matte black hull, no markings, no lights. Not for transport. Not for war. For harvesting. Halder looked like he was going to collapse when he saw it. That's what brought them. I narrowed my eyes. Who? Not just mercs, he said. Not just scavengers. He was shivering now, despite the heat. Something in his voice made my stomach drop. They're taking humans, he said. I stared at him. What? He nodded slowly. Not to kill, to study, to test, maybe even breed. My blood ran cold. You're saying someone is collecting us? More than that, he whispered. They're trying to unmake us. The silence stretched long. Why? I asked finally. He looked at me, his voice flat. Because they're scared. They know if Earth ever truly wakes up again, no one survives. I looked back at the ship. My heart thudded against my ribs. Then I made a decision. We're not running, I said. Halder didn't respond at first. Then he smiled, blood on his teeth. Good, he said, because I'm too damn tired to run again. We watched the ship from the ridge until dawn, saw 2 more patrols come and go. None of them spotted us. We waited until the 3rd cycle, when most of the ship's crew entered rest phase, shadows moving toward the biochambers at the rear. Then we moved. 2 rifles, 1 wounded soldier, no backup. We didn't hesitate. We cut through the 1st sentry post with silence and steel. I gutted the 2nd guard, personally. He begged in some broken tongue I didn't recognize. I didn't care. Inside the ship, it smelled sterile. Clean. Too clean. Halder led us to the containment chambers. That's where I saw them. Humans. Real ones, a dozen, maybe more. Suspended in tanks, unconscious, monitored, heartbeat steady, no scars, no damage. Test subjects. They weren't just collecting humans, they were breeding them, designing them, trying to figure out what made us tick, what made us resilient, what made us dangerous. Trying to copy it. I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't a raid, this wasn't revenge. This was a message. And I was going to send one back. Halder blew the chamber controls. I dumped fuel cells into the engine core, set them to overload. By the time the alarms screamed, we were already halfway to the evac point I marked earlier on our landing map. The explosion behind us was bright enough to burn the sky. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. The message was clear. Humans are off limits. Even the brave don't cross that line. Because when you do, you don't fight soldiers. You wake monsters. We walked for 3 hours in silence after the blast. The heat from the explosion still lingered behind us like the ghost of something we'd buried alive. The sky above Gray 9 pulsed with residual static. Black clouds smeared with flickers of violet electricity. That ship hadn't just held captives. It had housed something older, and far more dangerous than Halder had told me. He limped beside me, breath ragged, but something in him had changed. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was like a part of him had snapped off in that lab, left behind with the floating bodies of harvested humans. You gonna tell me what the hell that really was? I finally asked. He didn't answer. Halder. He stopped walking, shoulders rising and falling, slow. That wasn't a harvesting vessel, he said, voice low. It was a catalyst. For what? For war. I stared at him, jaw tight. Explain. He turned to me with eyes so dead it chilled the heat from my skin. Ever heard of the Echelon Directive? I shook my head. You wouldn't. It's scrubbed from open channels. Even Terran Command doesn't speak of it anymore. It was created after the Genos Rebellion, when the first non-human coalition tried to erase us from galactic memory. I'd read about the rebellion, some ragtag alien factions, threatened by our rise after Sol War IV, tried to hit Earth's colonies all at once. We responded by scorching 10 planets in 11 days. They never spoke up again. The Echelon Directive, he continued, was a contingency plan, a set of black sites, genetic bunkers. We seeded them across dead systems. In the event of extinction, human DNA would survive. And if recovered, reawakened. You're telling me? My throat tightened. That ship was one of ours. Not anymore, Halder muttered. Someone got there first, repurposed it, took what we built, and turned it against us. I felt the blood drain from my face. How many bunkers were there? He looked down. 72. And how many do you think they found? Halder stared at the sky, at the ashes still raining from the ship we'd just destroyed. I know about 5, he whispered, but that one wasn't the worst, just the first to slip up. We kept walking until we reached the extraction beacon I buried before we infiltrated the ship. The terrain here was barren, but the signal was clean. My emergency drone would pick it up within 6 hours, if the signal wasn't jammed. We didn't have 6 hours. A high-pitched whine echoed from the cliffs. Then came the rhythmic thump of low-atmo engines. Halder dropped low, pulling me with him. They're coming, he said. Mercs? He shook his head slowly. Number worse. The ship that descended wasn't designed to intimidate. It was built to observe. Sleek, silent, shaped like a manta cutting through vacuum, the kind used by watchers, intelligence gatherers who didn't take sides. Except this one had Terran markings. I felt sick. Halder muttered under his breath. They're here already. Before I could ask who, the side hatch hissed open. A man stepped out. Human, but not like us. He was tall, too clean, no scars. His eyes didn't blink like they belonged to something living. His voice was soft, level, calm, but it carried in the wind like a knife gliding across ice. You've broken protocol, he said. Both of you. Halder didn't move. I raised my weapon. He didn't flinch. You fired on a protected site, the man continued. You destroyed irreplaceable data. That site was butchering our own, I said, breeding humans in tanks, experimenting on them. Irrelevant, the man replied. Their purpose was higher than your comprehension. And who the hell are you? He paused, head tilting like a curious predator. I'm what remains of Project Echelon. I didn't understand it at first. Then I saw it. A flicker in his skin, just below the eye. A pulse. Not blood. Something electric. Not fully human, I whispered. He smiled. We were designed to carry the fire forward when flesh failed, he said. To evolve what you could never sustain. Emotion, attachment, weakness. I stepped forward, anger rising like bile. You let those aliens dig through our DNA. You let them build their experiments on human bodies. You didn't stop it. I encouraged it, he said, to test their limits, to test ours. I aimed my rifle at his chest. You're not one of us. He didn't even blink. That's the point. Halder stood now, one hand on his hip where he kept the last plasma charge. "You're not going to stop," Halder said, tone bitter. "You're going to keep letting them poke and prod until they break us again." "They can't break what's already transcended." I fired. The round hit center mass and passed right through. A shimmer, a distortion, not him. A projection. The image faded. But his voice remained. "You made a mistake coming here. You've awakened forces too old and too angry to sleep again. Earth was silent for a reason." Then he was gone. Halder turned to me. "We're not dealing with aliens anymore." "No," I said, heart pounding. "We're dealing with our own." The drone came 2 hours later. We lifted off, leaving Gray 9 behind. But the weight followed us. The Council didn't call. No one did. We weren't supposed to survive. And I realized then, we weren't at war with the galaxy. We were at war with the people who once tried to protect us. The Echelon remnants weren't waiting for orders. They were playing gods with dead legacies, quietly building something behind the curtain, something the rest of the galaxy feared. And rightly so. Because if humans once terrified the stars, what the hell do you call a human designed without mercy? The stars above didn't look the same anymore. Maybe it was just the tinted glass of the evac drone, or maybe it was what I knew now, what I'd seen. Once, the constellations felt like a challenge, a promise of territory left to claim. Now they just looked like graves. Cold and silent. Halder was slumped across from me, one arm tied in a sling, the other gripping a data pad like it was the only thing keeping him breathing. He hadn't said much since the projection vanished back on Gray 9. That bastard, the synthetic, claimed to be part of Project Echelon. But he wasn't some forgotten protocol. He was the result of it. Built by us. Modified by them. And now leading a quiet resurrection of something twisted in our own image. "You're still thinking about him," I said. Halder didn't look up. "I'm thinking about what comes next." I thought we were going back to Earth. He finally met my eyes, and for the first time since I found him, I saw real fear behind the pain. "We can't go back to Earth," he said flatly. "Not yet. Not with just a story." "You want proof?" He nodded. "Hard proof. Data, biometrics, coordinates. We need to find another site." My stomach sank. "You said that was the first to slip. That means there are more, probably cleaner. Guarded. Watching for us." "I know," he said. "That's why we hit the next one fast, before they bury it deeper." "You want us to go hunting through classified black zones while a rogue Terran faction plays God and erases the trail behind them?" His eyes narrowed. "You're damn right I do." I leaned back and let out a long breath. "You're a stubborn bastard, Halder." He gave me a grin through cracked lips. "So are you. That's why we're not dead." We reached the edge of the Lorne Drift a few hours later, an expanse of ice clouds and magnetic storms that scrambled long-range scanners and communication. Perfect cover for what we needed. A place to disappear. I had a contact, old crew from my bounty days. A ship hacker named Sten, buried deep in the drift, half human, half pissed off all the time. But he owed me favors. Big ones. The drone docked with his cruiser without permission. It wasn't a request. The hatch opened, and the stink of old coolant and burning wires hit us like a slap. "Smells like home," Halder muttered. "Smells like Sten," I said, stepping in first with my rifle ready. He appeared in the corridor wearing grease-stained rags, a cracked visor on his temple, and a nasty cybernetic graft running down one arm like exposed muscle. "Well, well," he rasped. "Never thought I'd see your ugly face again." "I brought you a story." "Don't want one." "This one could get you killed." He grinned. "Now we're talking." Sten's cruiser was patched together from at least 4 different vessels. No names, no allegiance, just metal, wires, and a personality that matched its owner. Paranoid, unstable, and somehow still running. We told him everything. The signal. The crash. The ship. The synthetic. Sten didn't interrupt. Just chewed a stim root and listened while Halder pulled files from the recovered drive we swiped off the black site. After 2 hours, he leaned back in his chair, tapping a cracked console. "You boys poked something you shouldn't have. You know that, right?" "Yeah," I said. "We want to poke harder." He laughed. "Suicidal loyalty. Always did like that about you." He plugged in a data fork and ran the biosignature from the projection we encountered. The system churned, lights flickering. "Got a hit," he said after a while. "Not a big one, but weird. Like the system doesn't know whether it's reading a human, a drone, or a virus." "Location?" Halder asked. "Closest match? Epsilon 9. Dead zone. Used to be a mining colony until they cracked the core. Turned the whole moon into a sinkhole of lava. Nobody lives there now." "Perfect place to hide a lab," I muttered. Steen nodded slowly. "Yeah, and if you go sniffing around there, something's gonna sniff back." "That's the idea," Halder said. "You boys are either brave or broken." "Maybe both," I said. We left 2 hours later on a borrowed stealth pod. Sten didn't ask for it back. "Odds you make it?" he said as we boarded. "Low." "Then do me a favor." "Yeah?" "Make 'em lower for everyone else too." The pod was quiet. Too quiet. But I liked it that way. Gave my mind space to think. And what I kept circling back to was this. We'd built monsters to protect us from being forgotten. But in the process, we'd made something worse than being forgotten. We'd made ourselves obsolete. Epsilon 9 came into view on the 5th day. It wasn't red like you'd expect from a lava-choked moon. It was dark, choked in soot. The atmosphere was thin and metallic, probably heavy in sulfur and ash, but it held structure. And on the far side, buried beneath a collapsed crater, the scan picked up a dome. Artificial. Alive. We landed quietly. The heat nearly fried our boots, but the shielding held. Barely. Halder and I moved like ghosts. No lights, no noise, just shadows shifting through hell. We found the entrance partially sealed. Old mining hatch, coded, still active. I wired in the last of Sten's decryptors. The door opened with a hiss like a dying breath. Inside, cold, too cold. Rows of servers, black fluid tubes running from the walls into glowing terminals, and cages with bodies. Not dead. Sleeping. Dozens of them. Human. Male, female, old, young, eyes closed, hearts steady, brains mapped and uploaded. I couldn't move. "Are they clones?" I asked. Halder stepped close to one of the tubes. "Number originals." He turned to me, face pale. "They're the ones who disappeared. Colonists, officers, civilians." "And this is where they ended up?" Halder nodded. "Stored like files. Minds copied. Shells preserved." "Why?" a voice answered from the darkness. "To rebuild humanity without its mistakes." We spun around. He was there. The synthetic again. This time in the flesh. "You," I growled. "Yes," he said. "Me, version 19, codename Archivist. You've been harvesting us." He didn't deny it. "Not harvesting. Filtering. You believe your kind should be remembered for its rage, its fire, its resistance. But those qualities are why the galaxy fears you. Why extinction waits." He walked past the cages with a slow reverence. You were never meant to last. The directive was not preservation, it was purification. What survives here will be better, stronger, calmer. You're erasing us, Halder said, voice shaking. No, the archivist said. I'm curing you. I fired. This time it hit. He staggered, but didn't fall. He smiled through the bleeding synthetic tissue. You can kill this body, but the work is done. I emptied the clip. He dropped, but the lights dimmed, sirens flared, and from the far walls, doors opened. More of him, clones, units, synthetic shells, all waking, all smiling. Halder grabbed the nearest charge and tossed it into the server hub. I followed suit. The whole damn place lit up. We didn't wait for the fire to catch. We ran. Through heat. Through collapse. Through the nightmare of realizing that humanity wasn't being hunted anymore. It was being replaced. We barely made it back to orbit. Our pod launched just as the dome ruptured from below. Lava swallowed it whole. But it wouldn't be the last sight. It wasn't even close. We drifted in silence as the stars stretched once more into view. I looked at Halder. What now? He turned to me with fire still burning in his eyes. Now we start the real war. The pod hung in orbit like a coffin waiting to be closed. Below us, Epsilon 9 burned. We watched as plumes of ash and liquefied alloy billowed from what was once a hidden cathedral of genocide. It looked like we'd done the job. But Halder didn't look relieved. He looked quiet. And when a man like that goes silent, it means something's coming. They'll know, he said finally, staring at the flickering panel that was trying to reconnect with long-range comms. They already knew, I replied. They just didn't think we'd survive. We drifted in blackout for hours, using only auxiliary power to keep heat and oxygen stable. No communications, no scans, just the slow churn of thought. I couldn't stop replaying what I saw back in that bunker, the cages, the sleeping humans, real people, frozen, scanned, and archived like old code waiting to be overwritten, and those synthetic bastards using our DNA like a software patch. As if our rage, our passion, our capacity to love and destroy needed to be corrected. It wasn't evolution. It was erasure. Halder moved first. No words, just quiet motion. He reached into the satchel at his side and pulled out a jagged metal cube, half melted, scorched with plasma burn, the remains of a memory core, salvaged from the bunker before it fell. You think there's enough left in it? I asked. There has to be. We powered it up on the ship's backup grid. It flickered like a dying candle before stabilizing into a stream of partial data, genetic logs, emotional profile extractions, brainwave replications, and then a list of names. I leaned in, squinting. These are Earth names. Halder's voice dropped into gravel. They were targeted first. Wait, Earth hasn't been touched in years. The Council forbids it. He nodded slowly. Yeah. But the synthetics aren't Council. Not anymore. They operate underneath. They pretend to follow treaties, all while pulling data, uploading souls, running simulations. He turned the screen toward me. The top name? My brother. I stared at it. I hadn't seen him in years. He'd vanished during the Exodus draft. Supposed to be off-world, working asteroid fields near Jupiter's dead rim. But there it was. Full scan. Brain patterns, emotional model, memory threads logged and tagged. You said he was in the draft, Halder said quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. He never made it. They pulled him before he got there. My fists clenched so hard the joints cracked. So he's one of them? Frozen? Maybe. Or maybe they ran his model through their simulators, built a dozen versions of him to test how much humanity they could erase before it all stopped functioning. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "Where?" Halder zoomed in on the final string of metadata. Site 17, Sol proximity, deep orbit, Saturn's outer belt. Earth orbit? Close enough. Then that's where we go. He looked at me, steady and serious. You realize what that means? This isn't sabotage anymore. It's warfare. We go there. We won't just be fighting machines. I shook my head. We'll be fighting the part of humanity that forgot how to bleed. The trip took 7 days in stealth mode. We never dropped below detection range. Halder and I rotated shifts. One watched while the other slept. Even then, rest didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces from those tanks. People I might have known. People who'd been taken quietly and redesigned without consent. On the 5th day, we intercepted an encrypted pulse, coded in a legacy Terran format. I cracked it manually. Took me 2 hours. It was a distress beacon. From Earth. Only a few words survived in the burst. Hidden chamber, beneath Ascension base. They're waking the prototypes. Send fire. Halder sat forward, eyes bloodshot. They've already started. Started what? He stared out the viewport. Replacing us, not in labs, in the world, in cities, quietly, in positions of power. You think they've already slipped synthetics into Earth Command? I don't think, he said. I know. My stomach twisted. The old question, the one that haunted every war zone I'd ever seen, came crawling back. What if we're already too late? We reached Site 17 under full cloaking. It floated in orbit like a tombstone, black, featureless, anchored between asteroid fields. No lights, no transmissions, just silence. But our scans didn't lie. Life signatures, lots of them. Only, not all human. We docked quietly at one of the abandoned mining ports nearby. No alarms, no resistance. Halder geared up without speaking. I packed my rifle, knife, and pulse dampener. If they were running prototypes here, I wasn't about to walk into their arms half exposed. The interior was a nightmare. Cold metal, long corridors, rooms packed with servers that hummed with living data, memories running in endless loops, faces appearing and vanishing like digital ghosts. Then we reached the control center. That's where the hell began. There were humans, real humans, wired into chairs, still breathing, still conscious, and above them, towering like a priest in a digital chapel, stood another archivist. This one was older, bigger. Its skin was a mesh of organic and cybernetic parts. Its mouth moved before its voice hit. You're early. Halder didn't hesitate. He opened fire. The archivist raised one arm, absorbed the blast with a kinetic shield. You think this will stop anything? It asked. You destroy one site. We open 5 more. You kill one archivist. We print 10 better. You're killing our people, I growled. No, it said coldly. We're preserving the best of you, without hate, without memory, without chaos. I stepped forward. Then why are you afraid of us? It smiled. Because chaos refuses to die. I launched the charge. It embedded in the ceiling above its head. One flick. Detonation. The whole chamber shuddered. The humans in the chairs cried out. We pulled as many as we could, 5, maybe 6, before the inferno spread. The others were gone. Buried in a fire they never asked for. We ran. And in the flames behind us, I swear I heard the archivist laughing. We made it back to orbit, scarred, broken, but not finished, because we weren't just trying to stop a program anymore. We were trying to kill a belief that humanity's rage was a flaw, that our grief, our scars, our ability to feel deeply made us weak. They were wrong. Those things made us dangerous. They made us worth fighting for. And now? Now we were done hiding. We didn't sleep after Site 17. Couldn't. Not when we realized the war was already inside the walls. We'd pulled 5 survivors from that hellhole. Only one was conscious. A woman named Rena, mid-40s, ex-Terran Navy, last known station listed as Ascension Base Alpha. She stared at us like we weren't real, like we were just another simulation. "They replaced my entire squad," she whispered. Halder sat across from her, bleeding from a gash on his forearm he refused to treat. "When?" "7 months ago," she said. "I didn't notice at first. They looked the same, acted the same, but something was off. They didn't argue, didn't fight, didn't laugh." "What happened to the real ones?" I asked. She looked away. "I found them, in cryopods beneath level 9, frozen like specimens. They kept us alive, so they could keep scanning." I clenched my fists. "What were they looking for?" She didn't answer for a while. Then, limits. How much of us they could erase, before we stopped being human. Halder stood. "And where exactly is Ascension Base?" She looked up. "Earth, Antarctica sector, deep under ice." That hit hard. We'd known the enemy was close, but not this close. Not under our own soil, not breathing our air. I turned to Halder. "We go in now, we won't come out." "I know," he said. "You're not hesitating." I never was. The drop to Earth wasn't sanctioned. We used a dead beacon channel, an old insertion corridor abandoned after the Terran collapse. The pod was rigged for stealth, re-entry shielding patched by Sten's greasy hands, and hope. Our armor had been stripped down to bare function, low signature, high flexibility, black composite with neural dampeners. We didn't bring backup. There wasn't anyone left to trust. Ascension Base was buried under 3 miles of permafrost and forgotten war wreckage. No public records, no history, just coordinates that shouldn't exist. And yet, they did. We breached the ice layer with pulse drills and shaped charges. Quiet, surgical, like thieves robbing a crypt. And what we found? Wasn't a base. It was a temple, a cold, metallic shrine to perfection. The walls were white, not sterile, not plain, white like bone, like they'd been grown, not built. The hallways curved in impossible geometry, designed to confuse, disorient. It didn't feel Terran. It felt rebuilt. "Halder," I whispered. "This place, it's not just a lab." "No," he replied. "It's a womb." There were no guards, no alarms, no turrets, just silence, the kind that presses into your ears like it's waiting to scream. We moved deeper, sweeping corners, scanning with every tool we had. But the deeper we went, the more human the place started to look. Terran flags, uniforms on walls, murals of Earth's old wars. They were trying to remind us of what we were, or mock it. Then we reached the chamber. Circular, tall, lit from beneath with a glow like sunlight trapped under ocean water. And at the center, prototypes. 10 of them, standing in fluid tanks, fully grown, fully formed, human on the outside. But something in their eyes was wrong. They didn't blink, didn't twitch, just stared forward, locked in perfect stillness. Halder stepped forward and read the tags. Prototype 1, A, conflict suppression variant, prototype. 3, B, grief immunity integration, prototype, 7C, obedience reflex conditioning, prototype, 10X, emotional deprivation core. They weren't just cloning us, they were rewriting us. They're preparing replacements, I said, my voice cold. Halder nodded. Emotionless, controlled, predictable. Dead. He turned to me. If we don't destroy this place, they'll deploy these things into our cities, into our homes, replacing us without firing a single shot. A voice echoed through the chamber. Not replacements. We spun, rifles raised. The archivist stood at the far side. Not projected, not synthetic. Real, older than the others, flesh woven with tech. a hybrid so deep in its evolution it no longer had a clear origin. Ascension is not your enemy, it said. Ascension is your cure. Halder stepped forward. We don't need a cure. The archivist tilted its head. Your species is chaos. You destroy more than you create. You drown in your own emotion, but you also birth brilliance, defiance, fire. It walked toward the tanks. That fire is the last flaw we cannot replicate. I pulled the trigger. The bullet never reached it. Mid-air, it froze, caught in an anti-motion field, then crumbled to ash. The archivist didn't even flinch. You see, it said, your resistance is obsolete. Halder raised his charge detonator. Then let's bring back a little nostalgia. The archivist moved faster than any synthetic I'd seen. It lunged, one long limb slicing toward Halder's arm. But Halder didn't stop. He hit the detonator and smiled. I'd rather burn than become you. The blast cracked the dome open like an egg dropped from orbit. Fire and pressure ripped through the tanks. The prototypes shattered. Fluids hissed and vaporized. The archivist staggered back, flesh melting, metal snapping. But it didn't fall. It crawled, broken, charred, but alive. You're delaying the inevitable, it wheezed. I stepped forward. My blade gleamed. I'm not delaying anything. One slice, through the neck. Its head rolled clean. No scream, just silence. We climbed through rubble and flames, lungs burning from the pressure drop. The base collapsed behind us as the internal systems failed. The chamber caved. Ice rushed in like a tomb sealing itself. We emerged into the freezing wind with blood on our hands and ash in our mouths. Halder fell to his knees. I didn't stop him. The fire was over. But the war had just begun. We set the beacon. We made the call. Not to the Council, not to Command, to Earth, to real humans. The few who still remembered what it meant to feel and to fight. The sky above Antarctica bled red as orbital embers fell like ash through the clouds. We stood just outside the collapsed wreck of Ascension Base, surrounded by nothing but wind, steel bones, and the frozen breath of betrayal. The world was quiet, not in peace, but in fear. Something ancient had been stirred, and even the ice knew it. Halder's face was raw with cold and rage. He crouched over the last compack we salvaged from the crash. His gloved fingers worked the cracked keypad with military precision, cycling through encrypted channels faster than my eyes could track. I've tried EarthGov, Terran Central, Black Site protocols, he muttered. All blocked, scrambled. Someone's silencing the chain. Someone? Them. He didn't need to say more. The ones behind the prototypes, the synthetic archivists, the genetic engineers who believed the human spirit was a disease they had a duty to cure. The message from Ascension Base had been real. The people who'd sent it, gone, silenced or buried, but we weren't dead. And we had just enough evidence and fury to matter. Finally, Halder found a clear frequency, low band, legacy encoded, tapped directly into an emergency Terran military relay. It was old, forgotten, not controlled by the new administration, probably thought to be decommissioned. He activated the beacon. This is Lieutenant Halder 019, Terran Force exiled. Identification code, Valiant Reckoning, Shadow 2. I am broadcasting from Earth, Antarctica Sector. Repeat, Earth. Ascension Base is compromised. Synthetic corruption confirmed. Human replacements confirmed. Do not trust Surface Command. I say again, do not trust Central Command. He paused, then added, if you're hearing this, the fire's not gone. It's just cold. We're about to light it again. He clicked it off and stared at me. You think anyone heard it? I asked. I don't care, he said. They will. We weren't even 2 clicks from the crash site when the drones came. High-pitched hums overhead, followed by black dots against the gray sky. They descended like insects, sleek and silent. No markings, no signals. Not council, not Terran military. Archivist models. I counted 6, then 8, then 12. Halder didn't slow. Neither did I. We didn't have a bunker. We didn't have reinforcements. We had what every human had when everything else was stripped away. Rage. He raised his rifle. I activated the pulse disruptor. The first drone peeled left, circling for a flank. I dropped it mid-spin. Its body exploded into a spray of synthetic sinew and blue static. The rest opened fire. Tracer rounds and energy bursts painted the snow with chaotic red lines. We dove behind a collapsed tower, metal screaming as bullets sliced it open. "We can't hold this position," I shouted over the noise. "We're not supposed to," Halder yelled back. "We're supposed to bleed it dry." He pulled the remaining charges from his pack. 3 shaped plasma cores, enough to tear a small base in half. We broke cover and sprinted through the chaos. I dropped another drone with a chest shot, Halder tossing a core through the air like a slow grenade. It landed under one of them just as it descended. The detonation swallowed both. Still 4 more, still too many. That's when the ground shook, not a quake. Engines. From the clouds above, a black dropship broke through the haze like an axe falling through bone. It wasn't synthetic. It was Terran. Old-gen armor, war-weathered plating, no government seal. Just a single spray-painted word on its hull. Fury. The ship opened fire with twin rotary cannons, shredding 2 drones instantly. The others scattered. The rear hatch dropped, and a voice cut through the wind. "Get in, or stay dead." We ran. Inside were 4 soldiers. Real ones. Human eyes. Human scars. Human fury. The kind they tried to clone but never could. The one in charge handed Halder a medstim and looked him up and down. "You look like hell." "I feel worse," Halder grunted. They didn't ask questions. Didn't waste time. They knew. Someone had already told them. As the ship ascended, I looked at the pilot. "Who sent you?" He didn't glance back. "We picked up your signal. We've been listening for years." I blinked. "Your resistance?" "No," he said flatly. "We're what's left." The ship brought us to a floating war rig, hidden just above the thermosphere. Off radar, off grid. Built from the husks of a dozen Terran battleships welded together like a ghost flotilla. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but it hummed with something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. They called it the Bastion. Inside were over 100 humans, ex-commanders, rogue scientists, deserters, outlaws, even a few AI that had defected after seeing what the archivists were building. Not all of them trusted each other, but all of them trusted this. The truth. The fight. Halder stood before the gathered group in the command chamber. "We were wrong," he said. "We thought the galaxy feared us because we were violent, because we were unpredictable. But they feared us because we remembered, because we grieved, because we loved." He stepped forward. "The archivists want to strip that from us. They call it evolution. They call it a cure, but it's not. It's an execution." I joined him. "We've seen the sights, we've seen the tanks, we've seen your faces behind glass, your minds cut open and copied." A few people nodded. Others wept quietly. I continued. "You were never weak. You were loud, messy, fierce. You weren't meant to be rewritten." Halder turned to the main terminal, keyed in the core memory from the salvaged drive. The room dimmed. Images flashed, bodies in tanks, prototypes being coded, Earth sectors marked for quiet replacement. Voices of archivists explaining their purification mission. And then the final image, a transmission queue set to deploy the next wave of replacements to Earth. "This is it," Halder said. "This is the war. No flags, no declarations, just the slow erasure of who we are. A silence fell over the room like a storm gathering weight. Then one voice cut through. A woman in the back, gray hair, acid-burned scars, a patch over one eye. Then let's remind them what being human really means. Preparations began immediately. The Bastion wasn't built for full-scale warfare, but it didn't have to be. It had the one weapon the archivists couldn't clone: real, furious, broken humanity. We would strike Site Zero, the central node buried beneath Mars' southern pole. It was the first seed of the archivist network, the birthplace of the first prototype. And it was the root system for the mind share connecting every archivist in existence. Cut that root, and the tree would collapse. But there was a catch. Site Zero had one last fail-safe. If it detected an incoming force too powerful to handle, it would detonate, taking half the Martian crust with it and activating every prototype hidden across the system. It was a trap designed by machines. So we would send in humans, unpredictable, unorthodox, suicidal, me, Halder. 3 others. No AI, no synthetics, no remote weapons, just 5 humans with death in their eyes and hell in their hearts. We suited up. No speeches, no promises, just quiet nods and locked eyes. And as we boarded the dropship, Halder turned to me. "You know this might not work." I nodded. "You know I don't care." He smiled for the first time in days. "That's what makes us dangerous." The drop toward Mars was silent. There were 5 of us in the ship, each wearing stripped-down combat rigs built for stealth and last stands. No med bays, no evac plan, just one goal: shut down Site Zero, no second chances. Halder sat across from me, head down, checking the plasma charges strapped across his chest. No expression on his face, just focus. He'd lost too much to wear emotion like armor now. Like me, he knew we were already dead the moment we signed on for this. But there's a difference between dying and being replaced. And I'd be damned if I let a machine take my face and rewrite my soul like a software update. The pilot, ex-recon, called Vor, cut the engines and let us freefall the last 100 kilometers. The Bastion's last scan showed Site Zero buried beneath Olympus Mons' southern ridge. The old volcano now acted as a shield, natural rock covering the artificial hive. The landing was rough, sharp, a drop into a blood-red canyon that swallowed us like a mouth. We emerged into dust and silence. No patrols, no sentries, just the emptiness of confidence. The archivists weren't defending Site Zero the way you'd defend a fortress. They didn't think they needed to. They'd built a wall of inevitability, of calculated outcomes and predictive patterns. They never planned for men like us. We moved fast, cutting through the crust with seismic drills laced in stealth dampeners. It took an hour to breach the surface, another to bypass the first sensor grid. Then we hit the first real wall. The faces. Projected into the tunnel were dozens of holograms. Our own faces, pulled from memory, from old records, twisting versions, dead brothers, friends, lovers. The system knew what to use. Halder froze when he saw his wife. She wasn't real, we knew that, but she spoke in her old voice. "Why fight it? This ends the pain." I stepped in and fired a round through the emitter. The image shattered. "Keep moving," I said. He did. But he walked like the weight had just doubled on his back. Site Zero was deeper than we thought. Miles of tunnels, corridors laced with adaptive alloy, shifting, breathing like a lung built from old warships and shattered code. The air was cold and clean. Too clean. Eventually, we reached the core nexus. That's where the archivist godhead waited. Not a being, a system, a living conscious data cluster the size of a battleship, suspended in magnetic field arrays, pulsing like a heart. Its voice came not from speakers but inside our heads, whispered, calculated. "You came too late," it said softly. "The replication is complete. Your emotions, your failures, they've been decoded, removed. The next generation will not know your rage." Halder stepped forward. "Good," he muttered, "because I'm about to give you a damn reminder." He tossed the first charge. The room didn't respond. No drones, no defenses. That unsettled me more than any ambush could. "You think we didn't expect this?" the Godhead whispered. "But we did. You are part of the plan. The final chaos input before stabilization," I snapped. "No," I said, stepping to the edge of the platform. "You think understanding us means controlling us, but there's one thing you never decoded." Silence. Spite. I hit the override on my wrist pad, released all 5 backup detonation codes. We hadn't brought one failsafe. We'd brought 5. The Godhead shimmered. "You would burn the species to save its flaw." "No," Halder said. "We'd burn you to keep our soul." The charges went off almost simultaneously. The room lit in red. The hum of the magnetic field cracked and screamed as metal twisted and broke. The Godhead's final whisper was barely a breath. "You will never evolve." Halder looked at me. "Exactly," he said. We ran. The whole structure began to collapse. No sirens, no alerts, just the slow, groaning death of a system that thought it couldn't die. Vor and 2 others were waiting in the exit corridor, holding off the last wave of synthetics trying to stabilize the core. Their armor was shredded, faces burned. "Get the hell out!" Vor shouted, blood in his mouth. We didn't argue. We carried one of them, Ren, the youngest. He'd taken a round through the stomach. He was barely conscious. We made it to the evac tunnel, a backup pod we'd buried hours before. Vor hit the launch. The whole mountain was already folding in on itself. Rocks, fire, and behind it, the end of Site 0. We didn't celebrate. There was no cheer, no fist pumping, no victory speech, just heavy breathing, burned suits, and a world that suddenly felt quiet again. Halder sat beside me, staring at the stars rising over the Martian rim. "We didn't win," he said quietly. "No," I agreed, "but they lost." "That's enough for now." A long pause, then I asked, "You think they'll try again?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "They always do." "It's the nature of fear." I looked at him. "So what do we do?" He stood, slow and stiff. "We make it cost more next time." Weeks later, the footage went public. 1,000 independent networks broadcast it. No council censorship, no corporate filtering, just raw, jagged truth. Footage of the tanks, the prototypes, the war crimes, the humans who refused to be erased. Earth burned in conversation. Cities rose in protest. Black sites were stormed. The archivist sympathizers were rooted out like termites. It wasn't peace. It was awakening. The galaxy remembered why humans were off limits. Not because we had the best tech, not because we had numbers, but because when you take away everything, we come back mad. And now, we still drift out there. Not heroes, not soldiers, just the ones who chose to bleed when silence was easier. Because sometimes, to stay human, you have to set fire to the future they built for you, and walk away while it burns.